This week, the parasha is Vayetze. And we read in Genesis 28:14 and 15, God made these promises to Jacob. He did the same promises, or a little bit different, to Isaac and Abraham before him. Listen to these beautiful promises that he made to us. You shall be as the dust of the earth. You shall spread abroad to the west, the east, the north, and south, as we all have. In you and your seed shall all the families of the earth be blessed. I am with you. I will keep you wherever you go. I will bring you back to the land. I will not leave you. I will accomplish everything I told you. Wow, these words should bring us such comfort and hope to our souls. They're God's promises to us. But do they? We may say that we believe in God, but most of us don't trust what he says. Now, if anyone other than God would promise these things to me, I would definitely have reason to doubt them. Because how many of us are able to keep our promises? I think that the problem stems from the fact that most of us believe that we humans are like gods, and we compare our behavior with his. He can keep his promises, but we have difficulty keeping ours, even though we think sometimes we're so important, like gods. Another promise that God made to Israel is not found in this parasha, but in Deuteronomy, where Moses repeats many of these things that we hear in these portions. He says, if you faithfully obey the voice of the Lord your God, and if you're careful to do all his commandments that I command you today. Now, I believe that the ones that he's speaking of here are the 10 commandments, because these are the only commandments truly we have at this point. So he says then, the Lord your God will set you high above all the nations of the earth, and all these blessings shall come upon you and overtake you. And then he repeats again, if you obey the voice of the Lord your God. And then he continues that all the areas in our lives that he would bless. Now, God's promise that through one nation, all the nations, all the families of the earth would be blessed. What's a blessing? A blessing involves being in a relationship where one blesses the other. If you faithfully obey the voice of the Lord your God, is a principle. We hear it from the very beginning, right? For where Noah tells God tells Noah to build an ark. Now, Noah lived on a mountain. It had never rained, but he faithfully obeyed the voice of the Lord, and his whole family was saved from the flood. Now, I'm not saying that our God is a dictator and that we have to listen to him. It has nothing to do with being a dictator. He loves his creation. He's like a father. When we tell our children certain things, what to do and not to do, it's because we want to protect them. And he does the same thing. So what is it in us that refuses to faithfully obey our Creator? His commandments are very practical, even if we don't understand them. We don't always understand why our parents tell us to do something when we're very young, but they usually are for very practical reasons. They want to keep us safe. And he's not asking us to be perfect. He's just saying, do your best every day. And when we fail, and we will, we can go to him. We can acknowledge what we have done, and then we make it right. That's a message of love. It's a message of loyalty. This is what the Torah brings to all humanity. It's not just for the Jews. But when you and I choose to disobey any law, for example, when we run through a red light and both cars suffer the consequences, can we blame the people who installed the red light? Isn't this what we're doing with God? The Torah teaches us about midah keneged midah. measure for measure, or some would say Jewish karma. The story of Jacob shows us that after he deceived his brother Esau and his father Isaac, he was then deceived by his father-in-law Lavan. He fell in love at first sight with Rachel, the younger sister, and he worked 7 years for her. But when the time came to have her, Lavan gave Jacob his firstborn, Leah. Now, it's interesting when I read this. After Leah had given birth to Simeon, her second son, she named him Simeon because the Lord heard that I was hated. The word for hated is snua, sin, nun, aleph. That's the root. Now, the same word we just read when we heard the second commandment, it says, he visits the sins of the fathers upon the children to the third and fourth generation, which means for a short period of time, just 3 or 4 generations, of those who hate me. Lisnai, the same root, sin, nun, aleph. Now, hate is a very strong word. When we hate someone, we reject everything about them. We don't want to have anything to do with them. Doesn't mean we don't believe that they exist. We can believe that God exists, but we can still hate or reject his teachings. And then what do? We turn around and we blame him for everything bad that happens to us. Jacob's mother Rivka convinced him to deceive his father so that he could get the blessing of the firstborn, even after she received the prophecy from God about the future of her twins. But not only did she lose Jacob when he was forced to flee to Haran, she died without ever seeing him again. There are consequences when we manipulate others, including God, or allow others to manipulate us. The end does not justify the means. Let's always be aware of this principle, midah keneged midah, measure for measure, and work hard to do as Yeshua taught us. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Now that entails intention, patience, endurance. It's not easy. But the promise of God that he will always be with us, that makes it possible for us to do. His Spirit gives us the strength to do all these things that are so hard for us to do on our own. Now, another story from this parasha is about Rachel. She stole the idols from her father, the teraphim, and refused to return them when they were searching everywhere. Now, Jacob didn't know what she had done when he swore an oath to Lavan, with whomever you will find your gods, he will not live. Rachel died as she was giving birth to Benjamin on their return to Jacob's homeland. How many of us, when we hide, when we worship our false gods, we do not live? We don't know that these are principles that God is setting down for us. And these stories in the Torah are not random, but they're there to warn us that the same thing can, and I believe is happening to us today. It's so important to be brutally honest with ourselves when it comes to examining and ridding ourselves of all the idols to which we have become attached. Our Haftorah portion is Hosea 13 and 14, where God was warning Ephraim, the younger son of Joseph, what would happen to Israel when they became prosperous and forgot their God. They worshipped false gods. Can we admit to ourselves that we are still worshiping, and one of the greatest gods that we're worshiping is the golden calf? The Torah presents stories to us from which we must learn if we want these horrors around us to stop. This week, our Haftorah portion comes from Hosea, and it's known, which I just told you about, but he was known as a prophet of doom. No one chooses to be a prophet of doom, But there comes a time when we must speak truth to power. Now, Hosea said this in chapter 4, verses 1 and 2, and 6 and 7. He said, "Hear the word of the Lord, children of Israel. For the Lord has a case against the inhabitants of the land, because there is no truth, no mercy, no knowledge of God in the land. There is swearing and lying and murder and theft and committing adultery. They break all boundaries, and blood leads to blood. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Because you have rejected knowledge, I will also reject you, so that you will not be a Cohen to me, seeing that you have forgotten the Torah of your God. I will also forget your children. The more they were increased, the more they sinned against me. So I will change their shame into glory." Who wants to hear this? We prefer to hear good news, only good news, news of God's blessings upon us. But we are told over and over in the Torah that we have been given a choice. We have free will with which to choose life or to choose death. There are people today choosing death. They choose to kill others. They have a religion of death. But our God asks us to choose life. And we, as his chosen people, we are called to a higher standard. We are to lead the way for the rest of the nations. And when I say chosen people, that includes those who have chosen to be with us, the Gerim, who join themselves with us. We have been given the options of blessings or curses, brachot uklalot. No one likes to have to make tough decisions, so we usually allow others to make them for us. We give them to people who don't care about us. They care only about themselves. How many of us relish taking responsibility for our lives? And so we choose people to rule over us who have few or no morals at all. And then we complain when we don't like how they rule. Our prophet Jeremiah wept as he witnessed the destruction of Jerusalem after God had commanded him to warn the people that if they did not turn back to him, the city would be destroyed and they would be carried away captive. Would Jeremiah not be weeping for Israel today? Are we not at war once again? This is not new for us. We have been at war since we left Egypt 4,000 years ago. That's when God formed the first IDF. He knew that we would need an army to defend ourselves. And it began with Amalek, who murdered the weakest among us for the sheer love of it. Does that sound familiar? Well, the spirit of Amalek is still here. I have heard one resounding message after the horrors of the Holocaust and after the monstrous behavior of the terrorists on October 7th. They've said, "Where is God in all this?" Now, anyone who knows the Torah can only ask, where are we? When I read that the name of Hoshea's father was Be'eri, and that the people of Kibbutz Be'eri were just massacred without mercy on October 7th, I wondered, is God trying to get our attention? Now hear me. I am not saying that innocent babies deserve to die. What I'm saying is that we are all responsible. The woke consciousness of Earth's societies right now is bringing more darkness into this world than light. And God, who is light, must be true to his nature. Let's each of us examine ourselves. Am I struggle with this on a daily basis. Am I bringing light or darkness into the world by my thoughts and my behavior? Am I living the principles of the Torah? In general, we've thrown out the 10 Commandments out of our courts, out of our homes, out of our schools. And then we shout, why is God doing this to us? The result is, in our society, we are living with such high levels of anxiety and fear and corruption, with love of evil and violence all around us, and so many more. I am so passionate about this because I've experienced firsthand the consequences of chasing after false gods. I stood staring at the sun like an idiot until I burnt holes in the back of my eyes. I held my arms out on the beach like Shirley MacLaine, crying out, "I am God." Imagine. I spent years experiencing the failure of the promises that so many religions and ideologies make, to the point of becoming so ill that I almost lost my life and destroyed my own family. If I can change the direction of even a few people, perhaps my tough experiences will have served a purpose. I'm still making restitution for my poor choices to this very day. But I had an epiphany from God. And I know now that I have finally found something that I can hold on to, that stands the test of time, and that I can trust to help me find answers for all that was wrong in my life and for all that is wrong in the world. Today I can say I am indeed blessed, like Jacob was. But these blessings come at a cost. Jacob had to go through many humbling experiences, and he had to work hard for everything he attained, and so do we. It is not easy believism. Thankfully, Jeremiah and Hosea both end on a positive note, as the Torah does. We read here in Bereshit 28:15, "For I will not leave you until I have done all that I have promised to you, all that I have spoken to you." Wow, what hope we have in that statement. Our story has a glorious ending, and we don't end up on Mars. We read our Hebrew prophets, they'll tell us how we end up. However, this journey through life can be so difficult, and at times it feels like a boot camp. We can trust that God will never leave us, and he will never forsake us. Instead of hating God and blaming him for everything wrong with the world, let's stop and take a look at ourselves. Let's ask ourselves, is my life adding to the light, to goodness, to loving my neighbor as I love myself? These are the things that bring joy and purpose and heal the world. Or am I adding to the darkness by choosing to hate, to not forgive, to hold a grudge, to gossip, to manipulate, to disobey his moral code of ethics, his 10 commandments? From personal experience, I can attest to the fact that we can trust God when he says, "I will not leave you nor forsake you, and do not be afraid, for I am with you." That knowledge is the greatest blessing of all, especially when I am afraid. Shabbat Shalom.